This is Where We Live from Connecticut Public Radio. I'm Catherine Shen. For Muslims, Ramadan is the holiest month of the year. It's marked by fasting, prayer, and renewing one's devotion to the faith. Here in Connecticut, residents around the state are marking this holy time with a variety of celebrations. But Ramadan is also taking place as Islamophobia is on the rise globally. That's according to the United Nations. Earlier this month in Waterbury, 2 young Muslim girls were attacked by fellow students at school. During their attack, their hijabs were allegedly ripped off. That's according to CT Insider. Today, we hear what can be done to better support the Muslim community in Connecticut and how they're observing Ramadan in this moment. Joining us now is Chaplain Ida Mansour, who's the Director of Field Education at Hartford International University. Ida, welcome back to the show.
Good morning, Catherine.
And for our listeners, if you are celebrating, we would love to hear your stories. Give us a call, 888-720-9677, or find us on Facebook and Twitter at Where We Live. So, Ida, can you describe for us what Ramadan is and how is it celebrated?
So Ramadan is a lunar month. It's the 9th month in the Islamic calendar. When you see a new moon, it means it's a new lunar month. So if you look in the sky today, the moon is waning, and it'll be teeny tiny on Saturday when we have our actual celebration. That'll be the end of the month of Ramadan. So at the end of February, we saw that little moon again, and we started fasting the next day. Fasting means that we do not eat, drink, or have marital relations from dawn till sunset. And depending on where you are on earth, the more north you are, more south you are, it really depends on how many hours you will fast. So at the moment, in sort of March time, it's not so bad because fasting, will change during the years. For instance, in 2001, it was in December, and so the days were very short. And so we were fasting, quite late and breaking fast quite early. Now, these days, we wake up at around 4:30 in the morning and have a small meal called suhoor, okay? And then we begin the fast. And it starts with a prayer, a dawn prayer. And then we just start our day. And many of us will go to work. It's a really hard time in terms of sleep because a lot of times the Muslim community are praying in during the night. This last 10 days of Ramadan is very, very spiritual. And actually, I just left Dia at the mosque this morning. People stay all night in these last 10 nights. It's very, very spiritual. And as the sun sets, then we will break our fast. And we usually break our fast with dates and water. And then have a meal. And part of it is, for self-control. Most of it is to have a connection with our Creator. That's the purpose of fasting. Fasting was the month in which the Quran was first revealed. And that's why we fast in that time to give thanks to God for revelation.
And it sounds like there is so much thought that goes into the fasting process. And I know you mentioned that when it's ending, you sort of have some dates and water to kind of get it going and then get a small meal. What's the planning process like? I imagine it depends on the person.
It does. As a mother, one of the things that I think is very important is hydration. And so before the fast begins, I have these huge jugs of water and I try and get my kids to drink as much water as possible. We don't want our family to get dehydrated or our community to be dehydrated. And so it's very important to keep hydrated during the night hours so that they can be hydrated during the daytime. So that's one thing, hydration. And then the other thing is in terms of, as a mother, preparing a meal beforehand. So our the family gets up at 4:30. Mothers usually will get up around 3:30 to make the meal in the first place. And so it's for women especially who have a household, it's a lot of work in that sense because we're having the spiritual side of things and the practical side of things as well.
So finding a balance there. And what do you want non-Muslims to know about this time, and how can they be supportive or be more understanding of?
That's a great question. So one of the things I think that is very important is just awareness. I know, kids who are in school when they are fasting, if their teacher knows that they're fasting, it really is such a support. I've had teachers who will offer kids space in their homeroom while other kids are having their lunch break. Just that extra part of understanding goes a long, long way. I've also heard of sports coaches telling their kids who usually run miles, saying, "Oh, maybe you can just do 1 mile this time," and cutting it down. You know, so those kinds of just showing that understanding, I think, goes a long way.
I mean, the fact that they can still do 1 mile on that is pretty impressive to me as someone who can barely do that on a regular schedule. And we mentioned right before the show that there are recent attacks on 2 Muslim girls in Waterbury earlier this month. And in 2023, Connecticut State Representative Mariam Khan was attacked outside of a prayer service, and she's the first Muslim to serve at the State House of Representatives here in Connecticut. You know, can you respond to what we've seen now and then, and how does it impact the experience observing Ramadan?
Yeah. So one of the issues is that there's a lot of misinformation about Islam and Muslims, and that's one of the things that the Muslim Coalition of Connecticut is trying to address. But it is a really hard thing to address because it's so rampant all over the place. And one of the things that I'm concerned with is if you're visibly Muslim, so women who wear the headscarf in particular are more of a target because they look foreign and so are perceived in a negative way. Mariam Khan is just an amazing role model for our women in our community. So I really want to give a shout out to her in terms of how supportive she has been of the community. It's really been amazing. And of course, these 2 young women, they were 7th graders. This is what I've heard. I've just read the reports. And I think one of the issues is having teachers informed about what they can do to support their students, how they can minimize bullying. CARE Connecticut actually did a study on bullying in particular a few years ago, and it was on the rise in terms of schools in Connecticut. And so we are very aware of that. And one of the things that we do is we have a speakers bureau that can come out and talk to teachers about the best ways, cultural competency and those kinds of things, cultural sensitivity, should I say. I think that's really important, that our teachers are very supportive, and most of them are. I know teachers who will during Eid, which is coming at the end of Ramadan, they'll have little packets for their students to share the celebration, and they're very thoughtful. The majority of teachers are very, very thoughtful and supportive.
And, you know, when these things happen, so many things go through your mind, I imagine, you know, good and bad, and recognizing, too, that the learning process, it goes both ways. So are there other things that people can do, you know, people in and outside the community, you know, what can they do to help make this process a little better as we continue to see headlines like this happen?
Right. Well, one of the things that I've really been so happy to see is the different iftar. So iftar means the breaking of the fast. Wadsworth Athenaeum did a breaking of the fast a few weeks ago. They invited the Muslims in Connecticut. They have a excellent exhibition. I'd like to just push that a little. That ends on the 13th of April, called Divine Geometry, which sort of illustrates the art, Islamic art, so beautifully. So so they had an iftar, which was really amazing. So there's a lot of outreach going around. Mariam Khan did another iftar at the LOB, the Legislative Office Building, which is amazing. Trinity also, that we had our Taste of Ramadan there. And all of these different events help build bridges in the community. And I think that's really important. And we also had a eco-justice iftar at where I work, Harvard International University. And that was also very well attended. And people, ask really intelligent questions, and they really want to know, and they really want to be supportive. So we want to support that as much as possible.
Well, and now, of course, we're hearing a lot of stories and news coming out globally, and especially we know that Ramadan is also taking place this year as Israel's military campaign resumes in Gaza. How is what's happening overseas affecting Muslims here in Connecticut, including how they observe Ramadan, how you observe Ramadan?
Yeah. This is a time when we're very, our news feed is very, very specific when it comes to Gaza. It's amazing to see the people of Gaza actually breaking their fast when they haven't hardly any food in the first place. So we are very, very aware of what's happening, across the world. And we, one of the things that we're praying for is peace and security for all people around the world, because it's something that destabilizes everybody, right, at the end of the day. And especially for children. There are lots of children who are now orphaned, who do not have a meal. And this is something that we, talk about when we talk about Ramadan. We say, well, this is a time when we think about those who don't have. When our stomach grumbles, we think about those who don't have food, knowing well that we will have a meal at the end of the day. But those in Gaza don't have that. And so we pray that there's a peace there, and that there's, peace all around the world.
Well, and as you work and pray for peace, and earlier we talked a little bit about things happening around us to help increase awareness and education, inclusivity and visibility for Muslims here in Connecticut. And you mentioned Connecticut CARE, which is the Council on American Islamic Relations. They're also working to make sure that incarcerated people have the right to practice and recognize Ramadan. And also this January, the state legislature recognized Muslim Heritage Month. And so these are quite a few movements happening, and I imagine it's continuing moving forward. So what are your thoughts about what can we do more to open up that inclusivity, or just comments on what's been happening right now?
Yeah, this is very positive, right? We want people to be more understanding of each other. That's the bottom line. And one of the things that CARE does is they advocate for Muslims who are having a hard time. So, for instance, there are several cases where a woman in hijab is told they cannot get a job because they wear hijab. And so they will advocate for us, which makes a huge difference. CARE is it's a national organization that really we rely on to advocate for us.
And we have a comment that I want to share. Listener Shakil Khan is sharing with us from Augusta, Georgia, actually. And Shakil shares with us that Ramadan brings families closer together and gives kids, especially younger children, the experience of thanking our God. It also gets children involved with making food. One of the questions asked was, what do you experience when you break your fast? And one of the things we experience is that it gives kids the opportunity to get involved in cooking and prepping food and requesting certain things they like. That's a very nice bonding experience as well. It's priceless. Well, thank you so much, Shakil, for sharing your story with us. And listeners, we would love to hear more from you. If you're celebrating Ramadan, give us a call, 888-720-9677, or find us on Facebook and Twitter at Where We Live. You've been listening to Chaplain Ida Mansour, who's the Director of Field Education at Hartford International University, and she'll be staying with us after the break. Coming up, we hear how Muslims in Connecticut are observing Ramadan. And of course, if you're celebrating, let us know. Again, the number is 888-720-9677, or leave us a comment on Facebook and Twitter at Where We Live. This is Where We Live from Connecticut Public Radio. I'm Catherine Shen. Today, we're talking about Ramadan, the holiest month in the Islamic calendar, and how Muslims in Connecticut are observing it this year. Joining us now to talk about that is Dia Fortenberry, who's an Assistant Athletic Director of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Engagement at Wesleyan University. Dia, thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And also with us is Chad Moore, who's the CEO of March Inc. Chad, appreciate you being here.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
And also Saba Shahid. She's a local author, entrepreneur, and pilot. Thank you so much, Saba, for being here.
Happy to be back.
And Chaplain Ida Mansour, who's with Hartford International University, is also with us today. And Dia, I want to start with you here. You didn't grow up Muslim, but reverted to it later on in life. Tell us your story.
All right. Definitely. So I grew up Christian Baptist, and I kind of describe my story as a domino effect. First, I met someone in college who engaged me in some pretty interesting conversations comparing Christianity and Islam. And then that was the first domino. And then I took a course called Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, the three Abrahamic faiths. That was the first time I had the religions laid out for me in a scholarly sense. These are the facts. This is when it happened, and this is how it went down. That was the second domino. The third domino that fell into place and solidified me wanting to become a Muslim was going back home to my hometown in New Orleans and finding a Muslim community and practicing 17 out of the 30 days of Ramadan. And by the end of Ramadan, the community was already calling me the new sister. And somebody asked me, have you taken your Shahada or your declaration of faith? And I was like, what's a Shahada? So a couple of folks gathered around. I took my declaration of faith. There is no God but God, and Muhammad is his messenger. And that's how I became a Muslim.
Well, it's quite the domino effect there. And now you're here with us today having this conversation. What was your first Ramadan like?
Oh, it was enchanting. That was the first time I had the opportunity to quiet my body to really listen to my soul. I learned so much. And being a sociology major, I kind of just nosedived straight into it. And I immersed myself into as much of the experience as I could. And I'm so happy I did.
Well, and so I love that combination of spirituality and academia. What was it like for you to, because I know you touched on it a little bit just now, but jumping into it in such a scholarly academic sense and getting to where you are today, can you expand more on what has that been like for you?
Definitely. So honestly, it's been the whole basis of how I approach Islam, and it hasn't stopped. There's so much richness to the religion and so many things that you can continue to learn on and study about and increase yourself in knowledge with. And it just turned out for me, the more I learned, the more I fell in love with, the more things started to fall into place, not just about the religion, but about the way I was created, about the way that I see things, the way that I interact with people, the way I see other people. So it was kind of a seamless fit, the spirituality and the scholarly sense of it, because the more I learned, the more I understood, not just about Islam, but about myself.
And Chad, can you respond to what we heard from Dia just now and share your own reversion story?
So, ironically, it's very, very similar. I met someone who was a Muslim, was having a conversation with, I didn't know they were Muslim. Mm-hmm. They had mentioned they were Muslim. And after I left the conversation, I realized I knew nothing about what it was to be a Muslim or what Islam in general, outside, of course, of what I'd heard in the media. So I decided that I was going to look into it and started studying. And the more I studied, the more I felt that it related to a lot of the views that I already carried. And also, ironically, I ended up going to the Berlin Masjid and met Ida's husband, Dr. Reza, and the imam at the time. And it was actually during Ramadan that I went to have this conversation with them. I decided that I was going to fast just to kind of see, what it was like. And I felt it was the proper thing to do since I was going to the masjid. I ended up staying for quite a few hours in great conversation. I stayed and opened my fast with the community. And I'll always say that, I came for the faith, but I stayed for the food. So it was an amazing experience. And again, very, very similar. And it was just, I had lost my mother to Parkinson's disease a year before. And I was really searching for a new spiritual outlet. And Islam really just, like to say, obviously God put it in my lap, but it fell into my lap.
Well, food is the universal language of all humans, I suppose, here. And it sounds like the thread that I'm kind of getting out from both you and Dia is there's this curiosity. What was it that sparked that curiosity, Chad?
To be honest with you, it was what I would say now is my ignorance towards Islam and what it meant. I was in high school during 9/11, and the misinformation, Islamophobia, was very strong at that time. And the community of which I was in was not very diverse. So I had no other information about it. And I was raised to be an inquisitive child by my mother. And I was also raised that no matter what you choose for religion, if it's making you a better person, then that's great. So that also, again, that upbringing left me to have the thought process and the curiosity to be able to look into it from just a real altruistic perspective.
And during that process, did you meet any challenges, or were people surprised to hear?
They're still surprised when people who don't know me find out I'm Muslim. There were challenges, I would say. My family was very helpful and, forthcoming with the change, but they were also, again, very naive or ignorant. So there was some things I had to work through with that. I will say my first Ramadan, great that, Dia had a wonderful experience. Mine was nice, but it was very lonely. I didn't know really any other Muslims at that time. I was opening my fast and breaking my fast by myself. And at that time, this was one of the first, my first full fast was one of the longest fasting hours in many, 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 many years. So it was hard, but one morning I woke up, I had just moved back home after college, and I woke up early. This is when we were working at like 3:30 to have sahur, and my father was making me eggs. Nothing was spoken about it. It just kind of happened. He made them, put them on the counter. He went back to bed, and I did eat my eggs by myself, but to me, that was kind of a pivotal moment. I was like, it's okay. I see that you're accepting this for myself, and that he was showing me that he accepts this as well. So very powerful moment for me.
And Dia, I'm also wanting to ask here too, of course you mentioned conversations with people and your own interest in the scholarly studies, but do you remember what was it that sparked that curiosity, and anything you would like to respond to what Chad just shared?
Yeah. First off, I can just speak to it being rather lonely. It was exciting for me, even though it was lonely, but yeah, definitely lonely. And I think sometimes you got to blot out the bad when you look at it, but because alhamdulillah, it turned out good as well. In response to what Brother Chad shared, but also what sparked the curiosity for me was how similar it was to Christianity. There was so much of what I did in Christianity that just felt to the second power in Islam, if that makes sense. Like it was the same thing, but like a more direct, and for me, a more meaningful and a more powerful way to connect. I'll give you an example. So I was Baptist. Every Sunday, there was a call to the altar where the deacons would stand in the aisles, open their arms, and invite people to accept Jesus Christ as their Lord and Savior. I would take that opportunity to come down from my spot in the mega church balcony, and just go to the altar, go to the steps, and just kneel and cry. And that's when I felt closest to God. Watching Muslims go into sujood, I realized, or even watching them just sit and make dua, I realized what I did on a Sunday for a couple of minutes every day, they do 5 times a day. There's no music playing in the background. There's no time limit, just them. And so obviously connected to their Lord, to their creator. So I think for me, just finding all the through lines between what I was already practicing and again, searching for a more profound and deeper connection to God through is what really sparked my curiosity. Oh, this is the same? What else is the same,
And Saba, I want to bring you into this conversation as well. What was your relationship to the faith growing up, and how has that evolved over time?
Yeah, great question. So, being a born Muslim, there's obviously certain things that you're taught growing up in the faith. Ramadan in particular, some of the things that I can remember are, my brother and I sleeping till, the last 5 minutes, and smelling the aroma of the food that my mom's making in the kitchen, hearing her footsteps becoming into running steps, coming to our door, knocking on the door, just saying, Asad Saba, get up, we have like 3 minutes left to eat. So those memories are, a core memory of Ramadan growing up. But also as, we're both, my brother and I, when I say we're both first generation Muslims, right? So my parents were immigrants from Pakistan. And so primarily our schools were, we were probably the only Muslims at the time in the school system. And at the time, our parents would write a note and send it in to our teachers saying, hey, they're fasting for Ramadan, so please excuse them. There wasn't very much more that was said, very much more that was asked. I think it was a very different time back then. Now, being a mom, I see Ramadan kind of in a whole new light, just Islam in general in a whole new light, because as a parent, I think other parents can resonate. When you have kids, you want, this month, but, every day for them to feel empowered and included. And so kind of that, progression, but also, being married to Chad, I think opened up a lot of different views for not only myself, but my family as well. I think when you're born into a faith, there's certain things that are just kind of passed down and you don't necessarily have that core knowledge behind. And so after, Chad and I got married, or actually even when, we first became friends, one of the first things that my family did, my parents have always been very open, for both when we were growing up, for my brother and I, and telling us, hey, we're okay with who you choose, but just make sure they're a good Muslim. And so when Chad and I became friends, I told them about Chad, and I was like, hey, but what both of them were saying about this time being very lonely. And, it truly is such a lonely time for reverts and converts. Even college students, I remember fasting as a college student. There's just no one around you. And so, for those people that are listening, this is, and if you have that core family background where you're celebrating Ramadan, invite reverts into your home, invite converts into your home, invite these college students into the home so they have that feeling of togetherness. But to go back to your question, Chad came over to our house to open up a fast, right? And my parents were, just so open to having him come, but then the knowledge that he brought with him, we were just like in awe about, wow, like how did we not know these basic things? And so I think it's really beautiful, the knowledge that converts learn, learn, and the enthusiasm and passion that they have sometimes I think gets lost when you're born into a faith. And so, becoming his wife, marrying him, and, learning about the knowledge that he brought into our home was just such an incredible and enriching experience.
Well, I think this kind of reflects earlier when Ida and I were talking about how the learning process goes both ways, the two-way street, whichever street you're on. And Chad, what are your thoughts in terms of your own experiences and, hearing it from Saba's perspective?
Yeah, I do want to touch on that her mother, she stated, knocked on her door to wake her up. She still wakes us up sometimes by calling our cell phone now if she doesn't hear from us. And
so nothing changes.
She has saved us plenty of times this Ramadan with 5 minutes left. That was my first iftar outside of the one that I had at the masjid with a Muslim family, and they were so welcoming. They showered me with gifts. I was sent home with handfuls of cartons of food so I can continue to have traditional food to open with, and it did help me, just as the Berlin Masjid did, understand that there are welcoming people in the community that do understand what a revert is going to and are willing to help out.
When you have two young boys at home, tell us what Ramadan looks like at your house.
Yeah, definitely. I guess I'll start and then
go for it.
So, Ramadan, we have two boys, like you said. One is 5, one is now 18 months. So our 5-year-old, definitely, Ayan, has more awareness of what's going on. He's very curious. So we've kind of used this time to teach him that, hey, Ramadan is kind of like a time to reset yourself, right? It's a time to reinvent yourself. It's a time to think about all the good that you can do. It's a time for you to seek forgiveness. It's a time for you to try to self-discipline yourself. So we try to tie in Ramadan and those manners. There's different things that we do. As a child growing up, back in the 90s, there weren't really, there wasn't access to like Ramadan decorations, for example, and he is all about decorating our house. So after, having kids, now our house has, we have this yearly tradition. Ada mentioned earlier that the crescent moon is the sighting of Ramadan, right? Back in the day, that's how they did it. And so we have this like 5-foot crescent moon that Chad and the boys now put together every year. It comes out when Ramadan is called, and it, goes away at the end of Eid. But, so we put out this moon at the end of Ramadan. We also have presents laid out, under this this crescent moon that the kids are just so excited to open up, similar to other holidays like Christmas, for example, like a child waking up Christmas morning, running down and opening up their presents. The house is decorated. We have like a good deed calendar, right? So Ayan is now at the age where he's learning more about what it means to pray 5 times a day. So as an example, if he does a prayer during that day, he gets to take a treat out of the box. And, one thing I remember as a child, and this is kind of throughout Ramadan, at the end for Eid, there's something called Eidi, right, that is given throughout cultures. Eidi is typically a form of money. So I remember growing up, my dad, a very simple man, would always give my brother and I a white envelope. Sometimes it would have our name on it. Sometimes it would say Eid Mubarak, nothing more, but it always have money in it. And, he still does that to this day. So, and he does that for our kids now too.
And me too.
That too. And so, building upon that, having presents, making it a truly joyous occasion for our children.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's just been great for us, as she mentioned, to make it a happy time. If you think about other holidays in America, especially Christmas, that the majority of people celebrate, it's everywhere, right? For now, sometimes it seems like 2-3 months where there isn't really that opportunity for children in America to have that experience when it comes to Ramadan and Eid. So we've tried to bring that into the household so they can always feel and understand every day what's going on during Ramadan. And the calendar that she mentioned, it's 30 days, and he pulls out little boxes, and he has prayed more this month than he ever has. And he's actually reminded us, like, okay, it's time. He's like, we need to pray. And I'm like, absolutely. And he's like, I can get my prize, right? And I'm like, yes. So, a gift always works, and that's fantastic. And we're just happy to see that also his school system allowed us to come in. He goes to Renbrook School in West Hartford, and we came and read a book and spoke to the class and gave out gifts. And the kids, of course, asked amazing questions. And it was really awesome for him because, again, he's one of the few Muslims in the school, and it's not something that all the other kids are talking about as they are with the other things. So it was really great to see that and great to see how much more comfortable he felt talking about it with them.
Well, and Ida, you've been listening to the story, and I'm seeing you smiling as Sava and Chad are describing their own experiences and also hearing a lot of universal themes. As Chad mentioned, he's here for the food. I think everyone can understand that. You have kids who enjoy their treats and their gifts, but at the end of the day, it's also about, as you mentioned earlier, all three of you, I think, gratitude and spirituality, as Dia has mentioned as well. What's going through your mind right now?
Well, a few things. I love the idea of the good deed calendar. That's lovely. One of the things that they mentioned about making it a good time for kids, I was at the Newington Library a few weeks ago, and I went in, and they had a beautiful display of Ramadan books. There are lots of Ramadan books now for kids. And a little girl who was obviously Muslim was in front of me going into the library. And she saw this, and her eyes just lit up. It was just an amazing thing to see. And it really kind of, you guys reminded me of her just now, because we want our kids to be happy to be who they are, right? And so that's something that's really important. Another thing that I'm thinking about at this time is in terms of charity and what people can do, what families can do. And one of the things that we do from the Muslim Coalition of Connecticut is we support shelters. And I was looking, on social media the other day, and there are specific needs from our shelters. So, for instance, Hands on Hartford require toiletries at this time. They have bare shelves, and so this is something we can do. This is something. So, I would just encourage everybody to, sort of look at what's needed in their food pantries and donate as much as they can, because this is a kind of a quiet time after December, January time. And so this is an awesome opportunity for us to be able to give. And the other thing that we do is we usually have a towel drive, a new bath towel drive, and we push it to after Ramadan this year because we wanted to really focus on that. And so if there's any centers, houses of worship, libraries who want to be part of this, please, sort of email me, and I'll set them up in terms of being a collection site for that. Because, there are needs. There are lots of needs around the state, and we need to try and address as many of them as we can.
Well, we'll have that contact information available for our listeners after the show. And I think the theme here is a need for a safe space as well. And ahead of the show, we spoke with Shanza Hassan, who's a third grade teacher in Manchester. And here's what she shared about recognizing Ramadan in her classroom.
I come from a very diverse district and school. We have staff that are Muslim, and we have a lot of students that are also Muslim. But as a first year teacher, I was very shy to even share like, oh, I'm fasting, or, oh, is there a space for me to go pray? I would just pray in my room. But as the times have progressed and I know my staff, I know the principal, and we've created relationships, I've actually created a space not for only my staff that are Muslim, but also for students. And we just pray together in congregation and we celebrate. So whenever like a student from another grade, it's lunchtime, they're able to come into my class. The students feel safe when they're coming into my classroom. They feel like they're being seen, like they're excited. They're like, oh, I'm gonna go pray in Miss Hussein's class. Like, I feel like they have an identity and they're proud of that identity.
And also we spoke with Aisha Malik, who's a special education teacher at Charter Oak International Academy. And she shared with us how Muslim teachers are working to get more recognition for Ramadan.
It's more so the Muslim community here has taken it upon ourselves to incorporate little things like at the beginning of the month, we had a welcoming Ramadan celebration where we brought in food from our cultures, and other staff were able to come in and learn a little bit about it and share some food before Ramadan started, in which we would all be fasting during the day. So it's more so the community here has really done a great job at advocating and teaching others, but I'm not sure the district itself has really done too much to support Muslim staff members.
And so, Ida, as we just heard, we hear a lot about accommodating students, not the other way around, actually, when it comes to celebrations like this. And you have students of all faiths at Hartford International. What does celebrating Ramadan look like, and is staff being supported as well?
That's a good question. So in terms of staff, I think it's really in terms of awareness. So where I work, for instance, they have specifically given us a date when we can be off to celebrate the Eid. They're very, very flexible in terms of the time. So, for instance, we have certain classes that are in the evening, and so a lot of accommodation is made so people can break their fast. So we say, okay, we have a 10-minute break while everybody goes and breaks their fast and prays, and then we'll come back to class. So there's a lot of that happening, a lot of support that way. And then during the Eid also, which is our celebration, I think that's a big focus in terms of how we can support our kids. We used to have a letter that we used to give to students that they could give to their teachers saying, we need this day off. So if there's any tests or anything to be done, can we do it the day before or can we do it the day after? So those kinds of accommodations. So those are the things that I can think of at the moment. But yeah.
Well, and Dia, you're in a university space as well, and today you work in DEI at Wesleyan during a time where DEI is under attack. What has it been like marking Ramadan this year for you?
Yeah, it's been different, only in the sense that I've found that I need to be a bit more outspoken about Ramadan and what it means and what it doesn't mean for me and for those who, because Muslims are a spectrum, for those who may or may not be practicing in the same way that I am. Similar to what Sister Ida mentioned, I think it's a lot about representation and just showing up and communicating what you need. So for me, what does that look like? I just have an automatic email that gets sent out. Hi, thanks for reaching out. I'm going to take this month to focus more on my religion because it is Ramadan. My energy may be a bit lower, but I will get back to you as soon as I can. Just something simple like that, something that opens the door for curiosity, but also sets a boundary, I think has been the main difference for me this year, where in other years I might just let it pass by, but like now where DEI is kind of being associated with something it's not necessarily. I think it's really important to be outright about setting boundaries about what you need, which is not anything that hasn't already been mentioned. But yeah.
And do you think something like that, setting boundaries, can be powerful? Because I think when people think about strength, they think about literally like physically standing up and shouting at the rooftops. But I think what you just did is actually sort of a quiet strength, it sounds like.
Definitely, definitely. I think setting those boundaries definitely garners respect for me from my colleagues, knowing that what I come to work with isn't just about, what I do from 9 to 5, but also how I'm incorporating my entire being into being the best Dia I can be when I'm available.
And can you talk about if there are any events, or what do events on campus look like during this time of the year?
It's been amazing. I want to shout out the Wesleyan Muslim Student Association Exec Board. They have been working so hard. They've put on so many different iftars. They are also going to have an Eid prayer and Eid celebration. I'm also going to shout out the chaplain here, the Muslim chaplain Jameer Mia. He's been working so hard to foster the camaraderie in the community of the Wesleyan community, not just of the Wesleyan Muslim population, not just undergrads, but also the PhD and the master's students. It's been a really great collective effort of just reminding ourselves that we can be proud to be Muslim. We can be proud to be Muslim. We don't have to hide the fact that this is a really important time for us. We can be happy. We can celebrate this time and really take advantage of the community that's afforded to us here, even though many of us aren't home. And then in the same way Brother Chad and I were talking about it being lonely for reverts, it's also very lonely for them. This may be the first time in years, if not in their entire life, that they haven't had a chance to break fast with their family or open their fast with their family. So it's been great. We've really been leaning on each other as a community, and it's just been an awesome experience.
You've been listening to Dia Fortenberry from Wesleyan University, and also with us is Chaplain Ida Mansour, Chad Moore, and Sabah Shahid, who are with us to talk about the joys of celebrating Ramadan. And let us know if you're observing Ramadan at home or even in your school or workplace. Give us a call, 888-720-9677, or find us on Facebook and Twitter at Where We Live. This is Where We Live from Connecticut Public Radio. I'm Catherine Shen. The end of Ramadan is coming up next week. Today, we've been talking about how Muslims across the state have been observing this special time of year. And Sabah or Chad, one of you I want to ask, or both of you actually, is talking about how would you like to see workplaces recognize Ramadan, as we sort of ended the last conversation on this point?
Yeah, I'll touch on that.
Sure.
So as the CEO of an organization, I've had some opportunities to start to interject a little more than there has been, because there wasn't very much. But one of the great things that has happened, has kind of become a tradition now, is Saba and our children come, and they bring little boxes with dates, which is, as we talked about, a traditional thing that we eat, with a nice little note that kind of explains Ramadan, and we hand them out to all of our coworkers. That way it's giving them awareness that I'm fasting, which they all know, but also, when it's coming from the kids, it has a special thing, a touch to it as well. And I also, I sent out an email to all of our employees today that I'll be on, so they can take a listen. And I think it's what both the sisters said that work in the school systems, is that it is up to us to create that awareness, to create that safe space. When I have taken jobs, I wasn't the head of the organization, so every Friday is our communal prayer that we have, and it is obligatory for males to attend. So when I'm going through the hiring process, I let them know that I will be required to leave for an hour and a half every Friday to attend my prayer service. And no one has ever said no. I usually do sometimes get a blank stare because they're trying to correlate me and the Muslim community, Islamic faith. But that's something that was important. And then when I was leaving, and people would say, "Where are you going?" Well, I'm going to attend my prayer as a Muslim. So it's again about giving the awareness. And a cool story is, after Sabah and everyone came, one of my coworkers came yesterday and gave me a little present in a card that said, "I just wanted to give you something for Ramadan for you and your family." And then asked, as we had a conversation earlier, what do I say to someone, when it's Ramadan? So gave him a little lesson there. And we gave you a little lesson. Do you remember what you say to someone when it's...
Well, I'm going to do that at the end.
Oh, okay, sorry. So I won't ruin the surprise then.
That gives me a little time to remember what it actually is.
Yes,
so it's just really my diversion. So Sabah, same question to you. Any thoughts about raising awareness in the workplace?
Yeah, I think, acknowledgement is key, right? Sending out a simple email saying, hey, it's the next 30 days is Ramadan, or sending out a simple email saying Eid Mubarak, something simple. Stuff like that, really promotes workplace positivity. You could offer flexible scheduling, right? Many Muslims, as we heard earlier, are, up at all hours of the night. We're working, we have families. There's a lot that we're juggling this month, trying to make, ourselves our best spiritual self, but also still keeping up with everyday life. So offering that flexible scheduling, will allow folks that are observing Ramadan to have a little bit more leeway in what they're doing. Some other things that could be done. I remember when I was, working in an office, one of the things that I did was I requested a place to pray. So offer a space for your employees that are fasting, a space for them to pray. Oftentimes this is the month where, all of us are trying to get all of our 5 prayers in, and other times of the year, might not be as easy to do so, but we really try to make an effort to do that this time of year. Another thing, we talked about food, avoid working lunch meetings, right? It's okay. I think all of us who are on the show today have probably been in that situation where there is food around us and we're kind of, okay with kind of, not keeping that in our focus, but have that ability to say, hey, okay, we're going to have this meeting, but we're not going to make it a working lunch meeting in respect of the person who is fasting. So like all of these things will help foster inclusivity, help foster, positivity for everyone. And, having 2 young kids in the school systems, I think it's very important for teachers, for parents that have students that are Muslim to, speak up, to share. All the experiences that we've had and wanting to share about Ramadan have always been positive. So using that as a platform to teach others.
And got about 30 seconds here. Dia, can you respond to this as well? I know earlier you mentioned one of the ways that you do it is to set boundaries. Anything else you'd like to add?
Yeah, just something I've seen has been worked really well on campus is the solidarity. Another shout out to our Christian chaplain, Reverend Tracy, for bringing interns to our iftars, just to see and experience what Ramadan is all about. I think the more exposure that we can give our communities to Islam and show them that it's really not so foreign, the Muslim God and things like that, kind of like breaking down those stereotypes and misconceptions, the better we'll be for all of us.
And same here, Ida, 30 seconds. We are coming to the end of Ramadan. What do you want our listeners to know about Eid al-Fitr?
So Eid is, we have 2 Eids, and so Eid al-Fitr is the big celebration that happens after the month of Ramadan is over. Usually people will get up early in the morning, they'll have showers, they'll wear their best clothes, they'll give gifts to each other, and then they go to the mosque to pray. We've started this new tradition where we go and have a big breakfast, which is sometimes very hard to maneuver because we're not used to piles of pancakes at that time. But I just like to wish everybody Eid Mubarak on Saturday. It's on Saturday. Saturday night, Sunday, right? Sunday, sorry. Sunday. So Eid Mubarak, everyone, for Sunday.
Well, thank you so much. I want to thank all of our guests for joining us today. Chaplain Ida Mansour, Chad Moore, Sabah Shahid, and Dia Fortenberry. Thank you all so much for being here with us today. And from all of us at Where We Live and Connecticut Public Radio, Ramadan Mubarak. I'm Catherine Shen. Today's show is produced by Tess Terrible. Our technical producer is Dylan Reyes. Download Where We Live anytime on your favorite podcast app. Thank you all so much for listening and take care, everyone.
ألطف بنا